The workplace is changing fast. New technologies, shifting demographics, and globalization are reshaping the way we work and the skills that will be essential for the future. And as the workplace has evolved, so have we. Lifelong learning to support lifelong employability has never been so important. At the City and Guilds Group, we believe developing new skills should never stop. We're driven by a need for individuals, businesses and economies to keep investing in education and the positive impact of gaining new skills.
I think the relevance of lifelong learning is probably more significant now than it ever has been because of the rapid rate of change of jobs that are available. There's so many jobs which exist now that didn't exist a few years ago, and that trend is only going to continue.
The nature of our industry is changing rapidly. So there is a real desire to upskill our staff and to make sure that we are building the capabilities for the workforce of the future.
I think learning and development within business, it needs to reflect the jobs that are coming and help people future-proof themselves against those.
If learning's treated as a bolt-on extra at work, it can get lost when things get busy and other priorities take over. Whereas if an organisation's taken on a lifelong learning mindset, it can really sit at the heart of everything the organisation does.
At the City and Guilds Group, we work across the globe to create life-changing opportunities, inspiring people to gain the skills they need to thrive throughout their careers.
Doing an apprenticeship at the Heathrow Employment Skills Academy, they really saw something in me which I didn't think I had. It has basically changed my life. That's the best way I can put it.
I've just done a higher apprenticeship in business administration, which has helped me to adapt my skills.
The apprenticeship helped me a lot and gave me more confidence. It's good to know that the company is investing and is believing in their workers.
We work with employers to effectively and constantly train and retrain their employees, whether through our innovative digital programs, executive coaching and mentoring, or quality technical training.
The impact that accelerating difference has had on individuals is huge. We see really large shifts in mindset and leadership capability.
I'm very clear now who I am and what values I have and what motivates me. Learning new skills and actually improving is something that I love to do.
One of the most important things in your career is to keep an open mind, because if you stand still, you inevitably get left behind.
Our heritage is what sets us apart. Today, it's that same passion and commitment to creating pathways for people to continually develop their skills that still drives us, developing the leaders of tomorrow and the workforce of today.
Well, good afternoon, because it literally has just turned afternoon, and I'm delighted to be here with my guests here today and you, the audience, to continue to discuss the theme that you've just heard in that film, which is all around lifelong learning leading to lifelong employability, a very important theme given some of the themes that we've been already hearing about this morning. And there's two reasons I want to show that film. One, of course, to promote the fact that City and Guilds Group is already doing a lot to support skills development, but more importantly, some of the phrases in the film, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit from Peter and Philip later, but phrases like learning changed my life, businesses need to have a lifelong learning mindset. I think there are examples of some of the work we're going to hear that you're doing in your organisations and really resonate when we think about the pace of change in our lives, in our markets, in our careers, in our workplace. And the relationship that we've got to have with technology, love it or not, it's how we fuse that for the positive application. So we've heard already a lot this morning about the changing nature of roles and skills for the future. I was even struck by some of Lucy's insights this morning, some of her lifelong learning skills, like applying how she sings to prepare herself for that sort of all-important board meeting with that sort of very male-dominated board to get herself ready so she can have impact, or the fact she plays chess to prepare herself for a strategy meeting. These are also lifelong learning skills that we need to value alongside all those important technical skills we need to learn and apply. And then we heard from Harvey, and he reassured us that the robots are not going to take us over. But of course, we cannot underestimate the impact that AI is already having and will continue to have and grow at scale on jobs, on professions like tax, changing industry, changing how we have to think and work. So again, it becomes a partnership, a collaboration almost between AI, the robots, and obviously the all-important human, our human capital. When we consider the scary challenge that was presented by the World Economic Forum recently that said that there will be 700 million people displaced worldwide by 2030 in their current roles unless they could reskill. But on the same hand, there's optimism there because, of course, that means there are plenty of opportunities for reskilling. What that does mean, though, is that businesses, organisations like all of you in this room, we have to get much better at identifying what those opportunities are and investing in them. And as individuals, we need to become more confident and assertive in taking responsibility for our own development and acquiring those skills. So I'm delighted today to be joined by two individuals who, not only representing their own employers, will also represent their own lifelong journeys and how they've invested in their skills to develop and reskill and think about the future. And both of my guests, just coincidentally, happen to be recipients of the City and Guilds Group Princess Royal Training Award, a recognised and prestigious standard designed to really honour outstanding and innovative training and skills development, which I think it's really important to do, to sort of really honour and recognise all the brilliant work that's going on out there with you. They are actually sponsored by our patron, Her Royal Highness Princess Anne, and the reason I mention them isn't really to plug them, other than say the closing date for this year ends at the end of March. So if you are interested, please go and have a look at the PRTA website, and one of the team here will Twitter that, so you've got the handle for going onto the website. So let me get on with introducing my guests. For those of you who are watching that film observantly, you may recognise one of them. There we go, Philip, Philip Quarterman, and beside your starring role in the film, and thanks for doing that, by the way, Philip, you are actually the UX, the user experience designer for John Lewis Partnership. You previously were involved in developing 2 successful MOOCs, massive open online courses for Coursera, and you also worked at the business school in Spain, developing content. So welcome. And then we have Peter Coates. Peter is a learning development consultant at Legal & General's Insurance Division, and has been at the heart of creating their manager-led coaching culture, improving customer experience and developing the talent of Legal & General's even more junior leaders coming through the ranks. Interestingly, Peter has actually travelled his own varied lifelong learning journey, and I'm very much that I'm looking forward to hearing you tell a little bit about that story as well. So welcome, and thank you both for being here. Philip, we've had a lot of talk, as I said, about jobs for the future, and you're already in one. The user experience designer for John Lewis is a job that didn't even exist in John Lewis, I think, 3 years ago, and certainly not in the HR function, which is where it's now positioned. So say a little bit more about this role and why it came about and the impact it's having.
Yeah, so I'm one of the UX designers within the personnel function of John Lewis. There are 2 other user experience teams, one in the Waitrose division for retail and one in the John Lewis division for retail. But I think having a UX team within personnel is quite a strange thing. Not as far as I'm aware, it doesn't exist in many other companies. How it came about was there was a big transformation in how personnel worked. We changed the operating model. We changed how we brought work into the team. I was previously in the learning design team, so designing learning content, but a lot of what I was doing was looking at, well, what technologies can we use, how can we help the business to achieve what they're looking for, and what's the audience that we're trying to get this learning out to, and how will it be most effective for them, which, as it turns out, is a lot of what a UX designer does anyway. So it was, as the model changed, we were already looking at this way of working, and the opportunity it gave was to say, okay, well, let's formalize this, let's make this into a team that can support the other parts of the personnel function so that we can do the future-focused stuff, we can look at what technologies are coming, we can be the voice of the user, but also in the Venn diagram of how we work. The business has requirements, the business has needs, but the user needs to be able to access the learning, to understand it. It needs to be effective for them. So it's kind of sitting between those two, sometimes as an antagonist and sometimes as a supporter for each of them.
Well, I was going to ask about that, because, I mean, did you sort of face resistance from some sort of your HR colleagues in some shape or form? Because all of a sudden you're sort of collaborating this technology into what is a very much a human-facing role.
I think there wasn't very much resistance. It was more, I think the first 3 to 4 months in the new model, a lot of it was, okay, if we can get invited to the meeting, we'll feel like we're winning. If we can get actually in the room with the people to explain what it is we can do and how we can support, then that's a big step for us. Because most people within personnel didn't really understand why there would be a UX team. Most were enthusiastic and happy to talk it over, but you needed to really explain what we can bring, what we can do to support them to do their job better.
And what have you seen as being the biggest benefit so far, if you could sort of just try and frame what you'd say that would be?
I think to help parts of the business to really define what the problem is they're trying to solve has been is a big step for us. That I think quite often you've got the retail divisions which really have a clear strategic view of what they want to do, and just to be able to help define, well, which parts of that are going to have the biggest impact.
And then point the talent at it.
Yeah,
almost.
Exactly. And for the user perspective, okay, this might be the best solution in the world, but it's not going to be accessible in the broadest sense of the term to that population. So just help them.
But it is also being used to inform then the talent programs that need to happen inside John Lewis in terms of the skills, the retraining that you most need to focus on to improve your overall customer experience.
And I think quite often any of the projects that we work on, the research that we gather for that project, sometimes up to kind of 70% of that research isn't useful for the project it was gathered for, but it can be fed into other existing projects to really help them too.
Okay, well, let's just do a very quick unplanned audience straw poll. You said that you're not aware of any other user experience positions being embedded in the HR function. Is anyone else doing that? Anybody want to put the hand up just so we get a feel for whether Philip's estimate was right?
We got a hand.
Oh, we got a hand. We got a couple of hands. Good. Well, I think you should get in a huddle later and see if you can sort of then create the ripple effect. So, great. Thanks for that, Philip. Yeah, use the app. Exactly. Use the app. So, Peter, coming to you, I mentioned before that, and we've talked before about your very interesting own lifelong learning journey. So, would you just sort of share a little bit about the path you've taken and why, and interestingly, what support you've had along the way?
Okay, so for 30 years, I was a police officer. I'm not actually sure that Tim realised that when he was talking to me earlier,
exactly.
But
I did wonder.
That's something we can talk about.
Get your warrant card out.
But kind of halfway through my service, I got into a training role, and the first training that I did was a City and Guilds NVQ.
Right. Didn't pay you to say that, did I?
and then I picked up a certificate in education, went on and did a degree with Canterbury University. Picked up Assessors Awards and Verifiers Awards. So, a lot of development. There was a pathway that I could follow. And then around 5 years or so, my time with the police was coming to an end, and I was kind of looking around for what I might do with my future. Saw a temporary opportunity come up at Legal & General. 5 years later, I'm still there. But I think there was something about that transition that actually probably speaks to all of us, which is for the first few weeks, have I made the right choice here?
Felt scary.
It's felt very scary, and I think I needed, that sense of, yes, you can do it. Yes, you've got a complete set of transferable skills, and I think until you're in that situation, you probably don't realise that you can chair a meeting. You've got your professional skills of L&D. You can do all the things that you can build your network up again, because of course you start from zero. And then I think in the last 5 years, I've probably my learning has probably gone exponential in terms of ILM courses in coaching and mentoring and psychometrics and lots of other things that I could name. So I think to cap it all probably was the Princess Royal Award last year, and working with a colleague writing that submission and achieving that, and because it was focused for people at the most junior ranks in our organisation. And one of the things I always talk about is with that submission was it had a relentless focus on behaviours. We run a 10-month programme which really looks, gives people lots and lots of feedback.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because I know, again, behaviours and attitudes, that's come up again a lot today, and no doubt will continue to. So how do you get the right balance between the behaviour and attitude, as well as then the technical skills that need to be taught and then applied? I mean, I know you'll really believe that you'd almost take behaviour and attitude over the technical skill.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if learning is changing what we know, what we understand, the skills, attitudes and behaviours, I think the first two there, we're living in an information revolution. So that those kind of things are covered. But for me, and I'm not saying you don't need those things, clearly you do, but it's getting the balance right. And I think that's what that programme that I'm talking about does, and that's what I'm thinking about for the future is how do we really focus in on the behaviours that we need? A quick anecdote on that is I'm leading a team at the moment which is running a transformation in an area of insurance where I work. we're using agile project methodology. So fail fast, learn, change, lots of pace, lots
One
of
team,
absolutely. And you know, what I need from my team and actually the wider business is people who are flexible, who are problem solvers, who come, you know, be creative, who are not going to kind of worry when the training plan is changed pretty dramatically, and probably who are optimistic as well, going back to the, you know, that word that we've been using today. So I think all of those things that I've just been talking about are the subset of what we call, or what I understand we call emotional intelligence, and I think that's where we really need to focus for, you know, for the future.
And actually, it's an interesting link to bring Philip back in, actually, because I know one of the things that John Lewis Partnership have done very successfully is set up your own vocational learning fund, which is about bringing together those sort of vocational applied skills along with those behaviours and attitudes. Do you want to say a little bit more about that and the success it's having?
So yeah, the vocational learning fund has been around for a while, but what we've seen is that people who use it really appreciate it and can use it multiple times, but it's a very small part of the of all of the partners who actually use that fund. So we're trying to find a way to make it more accessible to more people. And I think the importance it has, the reason that it is such a key thing, is that you can then direct your own learning. So we were talking, one of the other projects we're looking at is the skills matrix, looking at the job that I have, what skills are employed, which ones are transferable. But what you can end up doing if you leave that to the algorithms, is that anyone in a particular role will be recommended the same other roles.
Yep. A bit like that career advice and guidance you used to got.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's picked by numbers to a degree, but having the vocational learning is if I, as an individual, have a real interest in a particular area, I have some agency over making that decision, which an algorithm is probably not going to pick up. So it's just to giving people that option to say, this isn't relevant for my current role, but having a line manager who will say, okay, but that is a skill that would be useful for you in the future, and then allowing people to access it in that way. And
are you actually using it in sort of anger right now? You're actually something that's been applied across the whole of the partnership?
So it's been there for a while, but it hasn't been publicised in a way that many people have picked up on it. So what we're trying to do, part of it is making the current process a lot simpler. So we are using a lot of automation to mean that the people who make the decisions on, you know, is this course relevant, etc., they get it at a point that all of the technical hurdles have already been overcome. But so the partners can.
And you finding a difference in sort of age range of employees who are engaging? You know, do you get a difference between your sort of more mature older workers and the sort of younger talent coming through?
I think what we're seeing at the moment, the way that it's being used, is more about where you work. So if you're an office-based worker, you're probably aware of it and you're probably going to apply for it and you have the access to apply. But what we're not seeing is partners in branches who you know, make up the absolute bulk of our company having access to it.
Yeah, okay, great. And just coming back to the sort of this theme of how do we support employees more, and especially those who've maybe been turned off by learning at a younger age, to sort of understand their responsibility as well as the employers to invest in reskilling. How have you gone about that, Peter, at L&G?
Well, so we talk about, you know, I go in on all new entrant groups and sort of explain to them the opportunities that exist. And I talk about scaffolding. This is the scaffolding that we've got in place, and you know, you need to you know, go off in that direction. We run career development workshops and lots of things to support people. And I was explaining this to a group the other day, and one of the delegates said at the end, you know, that metaphor that you've used there. So I need to bring my ladder to work. And I think that what probably really nicely, you know, for me, illustrates that we as organisations need to, you know, build that scaffolding, those opportunities, but we also need to put a responsibility on the individual to drive their own careers as well.
And it goes back to this sort of notion of how we actually, as employers, have, you know, create opportunities for social learning, the formal learning and the informal learning, and how that scaffolding can actually acknowledge that, and how employers, as we heard with Lucy's example, need to almost recognise that that's as valuable for one of their employees as that particular technical skill they want them to learn.
Absolutely, that scaffolding shouldn't be considered as just being formal courses. It's the whole suite, the whole variety of ways that we learn.
Great. And Philip, today's all about humanity and technology, and you did win also a recent Princess Royal Training Award. I notice you're
it's
wearing
proud
that very nice badge. You can't see that at the back, but that's one of the things you get. You get much more than that, of course, is the pride for actually being involved in that. And I know that you do see it very much as a prestige standard to aspire to. And you won yours for a very interesting approach, which was all about human and digital in training. Again, can you just say a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project was, you may have noticed in John Lewis branches, all partners now have an iPhone at their disposal to help them to do their job. If you haven't, I'd recommend you go into a John Lewis and just browse and maybe have a look at those devices. And it enables them to do to a range of things that before they'd had to have gone to a terminal to be able to complete. So the aim of the project was to encourage partners to have the device with them, have the iPhone with them on the shop floor, and then to encourage them to use it for a key set of tasks that it could complete. The way that we did that was to have certain partners in branches brought together to be trained in how to train other partners in the device, and then to kind of run that training to be support within the branches themselves. And I think the key part here is that the people that were chosen in the branches to have that initial training were not the most tech-savvy people. They were not all from the home technologies department. They were people who showed an interest, people who were willing. And the most kind of powerful people that we had from those groups, the ones that when they went into the room were slightly dubious about how useful this would be, but then became massive advocates over time, and that's how you win people over. The key metric for us to start with is everyone holding it, is everyone taking it onto the floor with them? And then you start to see the use. I think that, the broader theme of technology and humans is if it has a utility, people will use it. If it solves a problem for me, then people will pick it up and use it.
And I think that just on that theme then, it's about removing the fear and some of the misconceptions around technology and this myth that robots are taking over our jobs. And
I think that's really true, because actually with the people that, we've got 55, we've got robots in legal and general doing the work that 55 people used to do. Yeah. But, for us, we've involved the people whose jobs have been displaced in working with the roboteers to write the scripts for the robots to take over.
Reskilling.
Reskilling, and then they've gone on to do more interesting, less boring jobs. And what that represents in terms of cost is that's taken about 1.1 million out of our cost base, which has allowed us to be more competitive on price, which has increased the amount of business that we do. And I think that probably leads to more job security. So the story here is about evolution, and it's about how we position those messages, I think, to our employees.
And it's also there about really, connecting the glue between what we might call the people experience and the customer experience. So what a great example of where you've been able to pass that benefit on to your customer, but your people have been so involved in that it gets a really sticky experience.
Yeah, and then, two of the people that now do a team of 5 has been created as well. So these are additional jobs that are running the robots. 2 of those are people that came through our talent development program, who were on the phones in our customer service centre, who had clearly had a technical interest, went through that talent development program, and have now got more senior jobs working with working as roboteers.
That's a great sort of success story and case study, given what we've been talking about. And I sort of need to move us on now to sort of come to a close, but just to sort of get into a little bit of the delivery, how learning and training is actually delivered. And if I just sort of paint a bit of a bleak or tongue-in-cheek picture of how perhaps corporate or training, learning, development programs have been developed and delivered in the past, whether 10 years ago or even more recently. Certainly probably pre the real impact of online and blended learning opportunities and MOOCs like the ones that you've been involved in, where you went off-site, you had a day out or overnight in a hotel, you got away early, you sucked on a Foxier's Glacier Mint, you had a decent buffet lunch and you filled in the paper happy sheet at the end and went yippee. I am being very tongue-in-cheek, so do forgive me. But nonetheless, it does feel different today, and it feels like it can be different. It feels like we can actually blend these more sort of informal and formal. But what do you think is the power of sort of technology in a very positive sense supporting learning for the future? Philip, I'll start with you.
Yes, I think, in the video I said that people need to future-proof, and I stole that from people when the last LNA I did during my previous role. people saying, I'm not sure what I need to do to future-proof myself for roles that come up. And it was, it's kind of, you need to provide that support. People are looking for ways to be able to fit into the organization. If you look at retail, I mean, self-service checkouts, all of those things, it does remove a section of jobs, but it gives you, within the partnership, the opportunity to speak to the customers directly. I think the way that we deliver the learning, a lot of, again, with this previous LLA, a lot of people, you know, when you ask, okay, how do you absorb learning at the moment? How do you interact with learning? There are a large group of people who would say, well, I don't really. So, well, do you watch, you know, YouTube tutorials? Do you listen to podcasts?
Exactly.
There are ways that you can take in learning which don't sit within the formal, as you've said. So I think it's just going to where the learners are is such a key part of understanding, well, how are you taking in information, whatever that might be?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's use that to our advantage to a degree to help people.
And certainly the case with of course, younger employees, and I know you do a lot of working with your younger employees in legal in general, so surely that must be an important part of how you train and develop, Peter.
Absolutely, and I think you know, no one size fits all either, you know, and I think that's where we've heard a lot this morning about coaching, and that's why we've got this coaching culture within our organisation, whereby, you know, every individual can be coached in a way that brings out their own individual learning, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Well, listen, I know that we've run out of time. Thank you very, very much, Philip and Peter, for that great discussion. I hope it's given some really interesting insights for those of you in the room who aren't already doing some of these things. And if you are, how you might think differently and embed them even more. So thank you for being with us in the room, the audience. And just to sort of replug, to make sure you go to the map room, fill in your card and tell us what you're learning so that you can win one of those fantastic exec coaching sessions from the Oxford group. So once again, big round of applause for Peter and Philip and for you.